1972, Carl Sagan and a bunch of other astrophysicists figured, well, we've got the Arecibo radio telescope all set up now, so let's go out there and write a code and send the strongest signal ever sent into space so that we could, like, reach out to those people out there in the galaxy. Maybe they can capture this code and then send a reply. Now, that would still take hundreds and hundreds of years for that to happen, but it was worth at least doing it. So what they did is they got together and they figured, okay, what kind of simple code can we write? And obviously that's a binary code. And if you did a punch card of this code, it would look like this. And it says that we're made out of carbon. It says this is our table of elements. It says that's our DNA structure. And it says we have a small head, a big body, and we live on the third planet from our sun. And this is the technology we're sending this with, which is the symbol for a radio telescope. Well, nothing happened, obviously, because it would take hundreds of years for that to come back. But that's assuming that they're way out there. If they are close to us, orbiting, you know, in our solar system, they would have got it very, very quickly. In any case, it wasn't until 2001, I believe, that the reply came back. Did you know that we had been talked to directly? Well, right beside a radio telescope that's typically hired by SETI to listen for extraterrestrial signals, a crop circle occurred in the middle of the night right across from the highly secured gate, which has guards and infrared cameras and everything. And this crop circle came together, this reply punch card came together with a mugshot. Right? They thought we'll give them a little bit more than a binary code. This crop circle structure is very complex, not very easily hoaxed at all. If you look at the way the hay is woven into the field, it's very complex, very difficult to reproduce in order to get this face structure in it viewed from above. And as well, nobody saw anything there, and you know, certainly there's security. And the reply is pretty straightforward, binary code. Now, when the binary code was decoded, it said something a little different from ours. It said that they were made out of carbon and silica. So that's interesting. There's been you know, people have been talking about becoming the crystal being, or, you know, I talk about human beings as biocrystals all the time. But what is important here is what I found interesting is that since then, this data that has come out that says that, in fact, it's not quite accurate to call ourselves carbon life. Because when you look into the fluids inside cells and inside the nuclei of cells, you find that there's actually more silica than previously believed, a lot more. And actually we're more like silica and carbon combined together. So maybe they were just being more accurate than us. And here they talk about their table of elements, which is very similar. And then their DNA seems to have one more strand to it. They have a big head, a small body. They live on 3 of the planets in their solar system, and the third one has 4 moons. And this is the technology that they're sending this with. And, I mean, this should have made the 5 o'clock news. But it didn't. And, you know, it's interesting that the SETI comments on this was Well, you know what? The radio telescope was right beside it. So why didn't they just send a radio signal? Right? And if this is true, why didn't they just send a radio signal? And my reasoning for that, my answer to that is that, well, maybe they wanted the rest of the world to have the information. Because if they would have sent a radio signal, I assure you that stuff would have not made it on the local radio station. So this is really first contact. This is them talking back. Are we listening? Well, interestingly, when I looked at the bottom of that punch card, I was very, very intrigued, going, well, what is that technology down there? I'd like to know. Maybe it works with what I'm doing. And sure enough, you see, but you can't do anything with it because it's so low resolution. The code is so simple. So I couldn't really do anything with it. And then it was found that the exact same field in England, a year prior to this card, this punch card appearing in it, across the same radio telescope, they had given us the answer to what's at the bottom of the punch card. The exact same geometry. They had given the answer before we asked the question. The same radio telescope with the same security guards and all this. They didn't see nothing. And this, again, is a beautiful fractal division of space based on tetrahedral arrays. Again, here we see singularity, boundaries formation, and then duplication of the boundaries with radial expansion in a tetrahedron array. So we have huge stones that in some cases are found hundreds of miles from the quarry where they were cut. Extremely precise buildings all around the world. Ancient societies, oral and written traditions that talks about sun gods coming from the stars. And even today, thousands and thousands of very powerful evidence of unidentified flying objects. You might wonder, why are these beings not communicating with us directly anymore? Well, that may be because our society has grown to be quite violent. However, couldn't we learn from the information they left for us thousands of years ago? Is there evidence that these beings were here prior and that they left, or they left us to figure things out until maybe we evolved to a level where they could contact us again? These are the skull of Tutankhamun and his brother. This is the bust of Nefertiti, all showing elongated heads. Typically, in ancient Egyptian tradition, the sun gods had very elongated head, and the semi-sun gods, which were the progenitor of the normal humans having babies with sun gods, would have not so elongated head. This is a skull that was found in South America, in temples in South America. This is enormous in proportion and cannot be the result of binding of the head. The reason why that is not possible is that when you bind the head of a child so that you deform the skull features, then this binding of the head deforms the skull features but does not increase the volume of the skull cavity. In this case, the volume of the skull cavity is almost twice the size of a normal human being. Now, if there was only one of these that were found, you would say, well, maybe it was an anomaly, maybe it was a deformity. Well, there's all sorts of things that makes it not so. For instance, the jaw bones, the feature on the cheeks bones are not Homo sapien. They're more of the Neanderthal and mix of various evolution in the evolution chain that we believe is linear in evolution of man, and they shouldn't be all combined in the same skull. The other problem is that there's not just one of these skulls that was found, but multiple skulls that were found like this in temples around South America and Mexico. This one is a little bit different, as you see. It's not as pointed. Still enormous and still has some of these unusual features in their facial features and the jaw features. Others found in Mexico is these melon heads, where those actually have even a larger volume capacity inside the head, very large eye sockets, and a very strange structure of the skull. This is not the largest skull ever found. The largest volumic cavity of the skull occurred on this, that was found with this skull. And this is like the M kind of structure skull, where the hemispheres seem to have developed in independence, and very, very large skull. The front portion of the skull are missing, but the plates of the skull are all there, and they're very large in volume. So these are physical evidence you can touch of these beings having been around in ancient antiquity. You find them, stories about these beings, everywhere. You find them in Mayan tradition, Inca tradition. They both call them the sun gods. In the Egyptian tradition, in the Chinese tradition, calls them the sun gods as well. The Japanese tradition, pretty well all around the world. In the Mayan tradition as well, you find grids like so that have mathematical information on them that are thought to be calendars, very precise calendars about the changes in our solar systems, and interesting symbols that have these vortices that are interacting. And when you look at the math from these codes, you find that they match the 64 tetrahedron growth structure of space-time that we've been discussing all day. This is some of the oldest tradition on Earth. It has very, very ancient writing. These plates, this plate in particular, is a creation myth in which the sun gods come to the earth and gives man the black, it's called a black sun in those traditions. It's been translated in various other traditions, for instance in the Quran, as the black stone, okay? And it's described as a very highly radiating sun, like a sun in a box, like a desktop black hole. All right? And the tradition talks about the sun gods coming to the top of the mountain and the humans going to meet the sun gods, and the sun gods bestowing this on the human. Then you find in these Sumerian traditions that these eventually built very complex, very sophisticated. This is where we're actually bombing right now, Iraq and Iran location, where very, very sophisticated pyramidal structures were built, ziggurats and so on, that were very sophisticated building and very large building structures. This is a view from one of them from above. Many of those are being destroyed as we speak. Many of these artifacts in these traditions are disappearing in museums in those regions as we speak. If you look around those regions, you find other things that are large anomaly. This is one of the largest, most amazing anomaly we have on Earth. It is the stones that were the foundation of an ancient temple on which the Roman Empire erected a more recent temple. Afterwards, used the old stones as foundations. Let me show you the relationship of scale of these stones. This is a person, okay, and this is the stone. Okay, it's in approximately 22 feet of elevation and has been raised on smaller stones, still very large stone, but smaller stones that holds them up. There's 3 of them, okay, that are remaining there at this point. They're extremely large. In fact, they weigh in excess, these one there weigh in excess of 800 tons. Okay? And this one here, that's in a quarry about a half a mile from the temple there, okay, is in excess of 1,000 tons. Okay? Those are extremely large stones that seem to have been moved with ease in antiquity. And that doesn't happen very easily. Other artifacts are found around those region. In this case is a little pot that has an insert that's made out of copper and a little rod. And when you put the thing together and put grape juice in it, it becomes a battery. And it's evidence that they were using these batteries to electroplate things. And so the batteries were found, and they're from a certain epoch that makes them approximately 2,000 years old, except that there is electrolysis that was made on objects that were found that are much older than that, up to 4,000 years old. And these must have been plated with the same principle. So there's evidence that these people were using electricity at the time. Okay? And here's a little reproduction of one of these batteries, and they get about 1.1 volts out of it. And in series, you could use them to electroplate things and do all sorts of stuff. This is very ancient, advanced technology. One of these plates that talks about advanced mathematics has a set of geometric structure combined with these mathematics. And sure enough, when you look closely at this geometric structures on those tablets, which are, you know, in fractal growth, they match perfectly the 64 tetrahedron grid when it's on its side. And here is the match. Amazingly, even with the little lines that go in the middle and so on. Perfect match. The tablets describes a geometric progression of the separation of space. Okay? So all this is evidence, all leading to an understanding that there is, this is the Kaaba in the middle of Mecca. This is actually from my tradition. My grandpa was a guide that brought people from Iran to Mecca, and he brought the prayers of the one that couldn't go, because Islamic people all have to go to Mecca once in their life. And the ones that can't afford it, they're allowed to send somebody else. They always have these good, you know. And so my grandpa was a person that would take the prayers of people and bring them to Mecca. He was a Bedouin. He ride on camel back, and it took 6 months there and 6 months back, so it was a long journey, and he would guide people there. And he went to this place very often, having this job, and more often than most other Muslim around our family, that's for sure. And my father has a news article from the Tehran press showing a picture of my grandpa with a small article, I think it was just after he passed, showing that my grandpa lived to the age of 128. And so, you know, this is directly linked to my tradition. And when you read the Quran, you find that, again, in this Quran, in the Kaaba, in the middle cube there, in this geometry, in the middle of this beautiful temple where thousands and thousands of people come to rotate, to torque the field around it, right? And you find that it described that at the center of it is what they call the black stone, or the black sun. In the Quran, it says that it was given by angel Gabriel to Abraham, and that eventually it ended up in the center of Mecca. Maybe we want to take one step back in order to make 2 steps forward. I'm talking about that. Let's assume that maybe because of all these anomalies around the world where people seem to have been moving extraordinarily large objects with what seemed to be extraordinary ease, that there was a time prior to our written history where on this planet, and prior to serious cataclysms that seem to relate to a flood story that is found around the world in over 500 different traditions, that there was this technology, this power source that allowed things to levitate, that allowed things to move about, that allowed information or energy to move through. And that this power source was given to us by advanced civilization that visited our planet thousands and thousands of years prior to our written history. When you do that, if you were a space traveler going through the galaxy and you found a planet that was very, very low in its technological growth, if they weren't too violent at the time and they didn't have too many means to be violent at the time, it would be easy for you to show up, most likely be thought of as a sun god or a god for certain, and give them, you know, technology that could help them along their path. But what if that path of advancement was too rapid for this evolution? That is, the people that got the technology eventually weren't able to handle it because they hadn't learned enough lessons along their path. Well, you would have to take it back somehow and allow that civilization to grow again and reach that level where they would understand the responsibility that comes with advanced technology. And I'm convinced that that is the lesson we're learning right now.